Quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you state
She's asking a
categorically,
question. Don't
Mr.
be
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You are
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
Can
No,
you
I'm not
give us
going to give you a
question?
question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Dave versus the MSM. I'd like to thank you for joining me today, and thank you for networking this information to anyone and everyone you know and love. The more people that are educated with information they'll never get through the bought-off lamestream fake media tentacle of the deep state, the more people are educated with the information we provide from this platform, the more people to become empowered. And the more people become empowered, the sooner we end this reign of terror. Many people said, Dave, that's an overstatement. Reign of terror. Really? Look what's happened in the Middle East. Look what happened in Ukraine. Look what happened for the past 3 years, right? With this and this. That's not a reign of terror. 9/11 or November 63, or right? Or any of the globalists constructed, and they do construct all these wars and conflicts and chaos. Oh, it's a reign of terror. And the sooner we end this, the better, obviously. But they don't want that, the cult. They want it. They want war in perpetuity. Why? Because when war hits, their playbook has actually been very successful in this. Weird kind of successful, evil kind of successful. They get more power, more control, and more financial resources. And the flip side of that album, that record, is people like you and me that they call useless eaters. We're the ones who are innocents who die in these wars. We lose more of our freedoms. We lose more of our liberties if we don't lose our lives. We lose access to food and water and freedom and liberty. That's what their playbook tells them. So this is why when all else fails, they instigate, launch a war. Because their downside as they see it is minimal. Their upside is enormous. And it always has been. Because the amount of power and control and financial resources they've been able to accumulate whenever there's a war has been astronomical. So it's really not a surprise that we have another major conflict, war, on our hands in the Middle East. And if the cult has their way, that war will spread like wildfire. And they're fine, frankly, if it ends nuclear. Because their payload goes up significantly. Now, not just hundreds of thousands, not just a couple million, but millions, and maybe even billions of people get toasted. But they'll just be fine. They're fine with that, folks. See, I think the biggest problem in the freedom movement is the vast majority of people can't get their head around the level and the magnitude of evil we are dealing with. James Howard Kunstler, a political analyst, recently said the following: "One has to wonder whether an army of saboteurs, globalist cult puppets and the globalist cult themselves, is on the loose across the land. Considering the border with Mexico is wide open, why wouldn't America adversaries send whole wrecking crews over here to mess with our infrastructure? There's no question that people from all over the planet have been sneaking across the Rio Grande. Surely some of them are on a mission. America, frankly, is filled with soft targets, things unguarded and indefensible. Not least tens of thousands of miles of railroad tracks. Of all the reasons to be unnerved by Joe Biden's open border policy, this one is the least discussed. But it seems like a no-brainer for nefarious interests who might want to bamboozle and disable us Yeah. Kunstler's right. There are many, many folks in D.C. that are more concerned with the Israeli border than they are with the flood of illegals coming through the southern border. And every state is a border state. Every port of entry. But the Middle East war, in many respects, is going the globalist way. It's escalating. We see missile attacks that's now beyond Gaza and Israel. We've seen it in Syria. We're seeing it through Yemen. Seeing it in Lebanon. When I'm recording this, Iran has not had any missile attacks on its homeland. But if I was a betting guy, it's a concern that the globalists want to escalate this to a level that none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes. Because they have to cover for the financial implosion that is occurring worldwide, that they have rigged to set up. You see, when the financial systems come down to the world, and they're in the process of doing that, they want you to be able to point, well, the problem is that Middle East war. As opposed to, if there were no war, to point the fingers at the bankers who created all this and say, wait a minute, you're responsible for this. But when there's a Middle East war, that's where everybody's going to say this emanated from. It emanated from the bankers. They have positioned themselves financially to benefit from the takedown of the financial system. And they've set their solution in place so that when the system comes down, you run to them and ask for their financial digital. And that's the central bank digital currencies. Please, the bankers will save you, public, useless eater public. But you have to accept our central bank digital currencies. How did that work out for the truckers with their digital currencies in Canada, where they were frozen and not so well? That was the appetizer. That was their beta test for this. Or they're going to have you run to their basket of currencies that they created that are based on vapor, called special drawing rights. Either way, you lose your freedom. Their solution is you lose your freedoms, your remaining liberties, your future, your life, and our constitutional republic here in the United States. You know, that's what they're counting on. But there's, you know what? There's been some fallout that has exposed their flank that they weren't counting on. There are two stories bouncing around regarding infiltration of the United States Defense and State Department by Iran. See, they weren't counting on this coming out at all. Because when people hear this, they go, wait a minute. Is a lot of this kind of a setup? I mean, let's go back to October 7th. How in the world can the most sophisticated military, with one of the most sophisticated intelligence networks on the planet, with the most sophisticated border security operation where they can tell from their fence a mile away if a flock of birds is coming their way, how can they sustain a surprise attack by land, sea, and air? By a bunch of dudes in hang gliders and drones and bulldozers and pickup trucks that had been training reportedly for months. How did not just Israel's intelligence. How did the Five Eyes, the United States and Britain, MI6, the CIA, the Australian intelligence agencies, Canadian, Japanese, how did they all miss this? Or did they miss it? See, they don't want you to ask a fundamental question. Because when you ask this fundamental question, yeah, they're savages and terrorists, but how didn't you know they were? Don't you have operatives on the ground in Gaza that could have identified these savages before they came over to kill innocents in Israel? I'm sure we did, but nobody said anything. Everybody had operatives on the ground in Gaza, Lebanon, and everywhere else. The fundamental question, how did this happen? You see, they don't want you to ask that question. Because they know when you ask that question, the answers lead to who was involved in this operation on all sides of the equation. Yes, we need to identify the terrorist savages, and yes, they need to be held accountable. But we also got to find out how this happened. How was it allowed to happen? That's a really hard question, because go back to September 11, 2001. You know what? It took years. It took years before a lot of people started asking that question. Or the Russia-Ukraine situation. How was that allowed to happen? What happened there? Did that all start in an agreement in 2014 with Obama? Is that? Because if that's the case, whoa. There are two stories bouncing around regarding infiltration of the United States Defense and State Department by Iran. Robert Malley, who met with Iran in the Iran giveaway during the Obama administration, reportedly, and worked with John Kerry during Trump's presidency in an unauthorized communications with Iran. Why weren't they prosecuted? Robert Malley was U.S. envoy to Iran appointed by Biden after having been lead negotiator under Obama of the Iran deal. He's been suspended now without pay, and the FBI, good luck there with an investigation, now has an open investigation of mishandling classified information. Since he only dealt with Iran, it's not hard to guess what country was involved. And then there's Ariane Tabatabai, Chief of Staff to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations, Christopher Meyer, is a longtime member of the Iran Experts Initiative, which is a front group consisting of academics and others who assist the United States government in dealing with Iran. Email communications recently between her and various officials in the Iranian government show that she had been taking directions from Tehran and reporting on matters learned in her capacity in the Department of Defense. These are two huge stories, but nobody's talking about them. Why? Because it helps answer the question, how did this happen? Yeah, we got to look at the terrorist savages, but wait a minute. Let's look at the other sides of this. How did this happen? We spend trillions of dollars in the military-industrial complex, the intelligence-industrial complex, the surveillance-industrial complex in this country, and it was a surprise attack. Just as 9/11 was a surprise attack by supposed 19 dudes with box cutters that were being directed by some dude on a kidney dialysis machine in a cave thousands of miles away using a cell phone and a laptop that circumvented the... A key feature of the Malley, that Robert Malley, the U.S. envoy to Iran, hiring is the fact that he has known Secretary of State Blinken since high school. It appears that the Biden administration is compromised by foreign agents. And in addition, the arms, the armaments. Where did these come from? The cost of the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle. Remember that the Biden administration was so clean, right? Yeah, it was clean, all right. In diplomacy and national security, this is from Peter Berkowitz from in national security, as with personal relations and social life, credibility is a precious good. Once lost, it's difficult to recover. With its botched withdrawal from Afghanistan in the summer of 2021, accompanied by falsehoods it disseminated to conceal its blunders and to meet its domestic political goals, the Biden administration dealt a blow to American credibility and undercut U.S. interests, which gave license to some of these terrorists to pull off their heinous acts. But it also provided them armaments, folks. Remember, the Biden administration left $80 billion in weapons and weapons systems in Afghanistan, which undoubtedly were transferred throughout the world, and in particular the Middle East. And some of those arms were used in this attack and continue to be used in this ongoing war. Reportedly, weapons used in the attack were laundered through Ukraine. You know, all those hard-earned taxpayer dollars that were sent to whatever they're saying, 160 billion on top of what Biden's asking for now, on top of all the dark money. It probably adds up to, 300, 400 billion. Those weapon systems were laundered from Ukraine and now are in the Middle East being used by terrorist states. And then let's not forget the $6 billion of late that Biden and Harris handed over to Iran. But it's not, and remember, these armed procurements, the concern is that a lot of that money for these arms procurements are actually laundered back into the political world, into Washington, to people that have D's and R's after their name. Remember, one political party, I've told you for 13 years on this platform, the Republicans, owned and operated by a criminal syndicate, that criminal syndicate being the Criminal International Banking Syndicate. I've said that for 13 years, was accused of being a conspiracy theorist when I first brought this to the forefront 13 years ago, and it might be conspiracy, but it's conspiracy reality. And one of the concerns that a number of us have are the dual citizens in our government. Are you aware of that? You know, there are estimates that over 50% of the United States Congress have dual citizenships. I don't know of another country that allows dual citizens in their political legislatures, if you will. Because you have to wonder, who are they serving? Anyone that's a dual citizen with, I don't care, Canada, France, Britain, Israel, Mars, should not be in public office in this country because we don't know whose interests they ultimately are representing. From Michael Hager, dual citizens in Congress, we need to know. It's important for citizens to know if their representatives have dual citizenship because both real and apparent conflicts of interest erode public trust. The Congressional Research Service maintains a detailed personal profile on each member of Congress that includes age, political party, past occupations, education, religion, gender, ethnicity, and military service. If the Congressional Research Office would simply add citizenship to its list of profile categories, Americans could better judge whether their representatives are where their representatives are coming from when they take a public stand on a foreign policy issue affecting a country where they have a citizenship tie. Such exposure would also help eliminate corrupting conflicts of interest. Wouldn't you like to know if your member of Congress, your senator, was a dual citizen with another country? I do. I don't think that's being unreasonable. Folks, it's imperative that we become the blockade to war. We become the blockade to the merchants of death and destruction. The way we do that is by putting pressure on those in Congress and the White House. A couple simple questions. Number one, Congressman, Senator, do you have dual citizenship with another country? If so, what country? Number two, Congressman, Senator, do you have any financial relationships with any of these other countries? Or any of these industries that are profiteering from war? Congressman, Senator, what are you doing to end the racket of war, to try to prevent World War III? And what are you doing from the peace initiative side of the equation? Because if you're not doing that, and if you won't answer my questions, then we're going to find somebody to run against you in the primary. So you can't sit in your big fat leather chair and count all that money coming your way from wherever. They hate it when you do that. They despise it. Why? Because it scares them. Because they're worried that no matter how they try to rig whatever, the machines, if too many people are wise to their racket, to their con, that they can't rig the machines enough to keep their seat. It scares them. And that's good. Because the only thing separating our world from a world war is you. You asking the appropriate questions and demanding answers. And when it comes to this war in the Middle East, how did this happen? And anyone not willing to look you in the eye and not willing to give you a straight answer is part of the problem and not part of the answers. I thank you for joining me today. We are available 24/7 at DaveJanda.com. Our premium service subscription content and email service is second to none. It puts you months, years, and our subscribers will tell you in some cases decades ahead of the globalist constructed curve that ends in a brick wall with the shattering of your freedoms, your liberties, your future, your life in our constitutional republic. Try it for a month. If you don't like it, get rid of it, but I don't know why. Because that service at DaveJanda.com saves lives. Just ask our subscribers. They'll tell you. I thank you for joining me today. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.